Hello, this film's about understanding the differences between essays and reports. And it's really for an international student who's having difficulty, who's finding it hard to understand the difference. Perhaps you're at university in the UK and you've been asked to write an essay or prepare a report on something by one of your professors or teachers in the class. So, firstly, what is an essay? An essay is a very common thing for you to be asked to do when you're studying, and it's a piece of writing that is all about outlining and expressing your ideas and opinions on a particular topic. So, for example, your teacher might ask you to imagine what a frog is like and what it does, and imagine and write an essay about a day in the life of a frog. So, in this case, an essay is very subjective. It's about your own thoughts and feelings. What is it like to be that frog? What would I need to do every day? I would need to perhaps go and catch something to eat and then come back to my pond and have a rest. So, those are your ideas. You've not asked anybody, you've not read anything perhaps about that. It's just your imagination. So it presents a point of view, usually your point of view because you're the author of the essay, you're writing the essay. And sometimes you're asked to support that view with evidence. Sometimes you don't need to do that. It's just a creative, imaginative way for you to express your ideas in a kind of story. So, for example, a personal essay about a memorable experience that you've had. What's the best holiday or day trip you've ever had in your life? A report, meanwhile, is more formal. It's a formal document that is all about presenting information and findings on a specific topic. So these are very common if you're studying science, engineering, technology, computing, maths, those sort of subjects, whereas essays are more for history, the humanities, geography, those sort of things. So, the key features of a report are that, firstly, it's objective. It's presenting facts and data without any of your ideas or thoughts or feelings about those facts and data, without that personal bias in there. There should be no personal bias in a report. It should be informative, so it's very clear, it's very succinct and concise information. And it follows a specific structure. So, usually, a report has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion at the end, maybe with some recommendations finally. So, for example, you might be asked to write a scientific report on whether climate change is affecting your local area. So, what are the key differences? Firstly, its purpose. So, the purpose of an essay is to explain and express personal ideas and opinions. And for reports, it's really to inform and present findings very, very clearly and objectively. Another difference is in the style. An essay style is very creative, so it uses creative language and figurative speech, whereas reports use more formal language and it avoids those personal pronouns that you might use in an essay. So it's very much in a report about third person past tense. There's no first person or second person like there might be in an essay. An essay could be in present tense, it could even be in future tense, whereas a report you would always use third person past tense. Also, in the structure, essays are much more flexible. Usually, they it depends really on the type of essay. If it's a historical essay or a creative sort of story type piece of work, and your professors or tutors would guide you to that. But usually there's an introduction, there's a middle bit, and there's the kind of the wrap up at the end. So essays tend to be in 3 parts, and they use quite large paragraphs, whereas reports, like I say, follow a standard structure. There's an introduction, maybe there's an abstract, maybe there's a literature review, maybe there's a section about your methods, what you've actually done to go and collect the data that you're going to be writing about later. And once you've analysed that data, you would have a section in your report about a discussion about what you found, your conclusions, and maybe recommendations at the end, with a list of references and any appendices coming finally towards the end of that report. So here's some examples. Have a go. Stop this film, have a look at this, and look at this. So there are 2 there. Which is an essay and which is a report? Any ideas? Hopefully you've got it. The first one that just says introduction at the top, it's an essay written in 1803. And this piece of work at the bottom was written in 2023, and I took that from the BP, which is a company website. I've put the URL there, and you can have a look at the whole report if you want to, so you understand what a report looks like. But I've just taken this one page from that report as an example to help you learn about what a report looks like. So there are some differences between the essay at the top and the report at the bottom. So for example, you can tell it's an essay because the one at the top, if you read it, it's about someone's life. It's their kind of life story about their kids, about how their kids were educated, what sort of life they were living. And that's really only got one large paragraph with one main heading at the top. It says introduction. So this is a story of somebody's life. It uses that informal, more creative language. It's in second person, past tense. It's quite figurative, creative, descriptive language. Whereas the report, it's a business report. It's about an energy business. BP is an energy business, but you don't need to know that. The main heading tells you energy outlook. So it's got several subheadings. It's got the main heading, energy outlook, and then it's got some smaller subheadings, themselves with small paragraphs. So the report is split up into smaller parts, these smaller paragraphs. Whereas the essay, there's just 2 main paragraphs there, aren't there? And they're quite large. Whereas the report, quite small paragraphs, quite easy to digest and understand. So the subheadings with the small paragraphs, there's also a graph there. So we're not relying on people being able to read everything, because you can look at that graph. It's a picture basically showing you some data and presenting the pattern of that data. Whereas the essay is quite dense, heavy text to get through. The report has formal language. It's third person. It's written in third person, past tense, and it's discussing data. So it's very unbiased. People's views haven't been put into it, or their imagination hasn't been put into what they're writing about. So when you're writing essays and reports, when you're perhaps asked to write an essay, perhaps brainstorm ideas. Think about, what is it I want to write about exactly, and develop a clear idea about what you will focus upon. Perhaps if you need to use evidence to support your arguments, that's not so important in a more creative essay. But if your teacher has asked you to do that, then you need to put that in. And consider who you're writing for, who is your audience, and use appropriate language for that. You can imagine if you're writing for a group of teenagers, that's going to be very different to writing for an adult audience. Reports, meanwhile, you need to go and conduct some thorough research. You perhaps need to go and get some information or some data that you are going to use to investigate something, to analyze, and to write about in your conclusions of your report. So you need to organize your information very clearly and logically. So we have the introduction at the beginning, etc., as I've outlined before, and use visuals to help you, things like charts and graphs and tables and diagrams to help the reader understand what it is you want them to. So here's a table finally in terms of the key differences. So you've got the purpose of an essay to express personal ideas and opinions, whereas a report is really to inform and present findings objectively, but it could also be creatively in an essay, whereas in a report it's got to be objectively. In an essay, you use creative language and figurative speech in terms of style, whereas a report is much more formal and you would avoid those personal pronouns. In terms of structure, an essay is much more flexible and it can vary depending on the type of the essay, usually in 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the ending, whereas a report would follow a standard structure. And the person who's commissioned you to write the report would probably outline the structure they want. But typically, you have the introduction, you have some sort of main body that might include literature review, that might include data collection and analysis, and then you come to conclusions, maybe recommendations at the end. So, report very formal, very clear and concise. An essay much more creative and flexible in how you write it.